So you leave your home because you don't want anything to do with Scientology, but then you end up in the homes of Scientologists. It's just...
It's too much pressure for a 15-year-old to make rent, somehow feed himself, has no idea how to do any of these things because I wasn't ever in a house where that happened. The Sea Org was like, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to worry about paying rent. You don't have to worry about how you're going to get fed. So it was like 3 hots and a cot. They put me in charge, like the personnel director of that organization at 15 years old. That's what was my first job in the Sea organization. I'm like, as the head of personnel, my main job is to get people into the Sea organization. That's like my number one job in life, is to get people in.
That is so ironic, Mark. Like, that's your job and you've been dodging it for so long and now you're that person. Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening, you want to see our faces, go to my YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can join in on the conversation in the comments. I love seeing what you guys have to say about the episode, and it's really, really nice to leave words of encouragement for our guests who are coming on and sharing their stories so bravely. So today's guest, you guys have been asking for him for a while. We got his wife on, you just saw her, and we are going to go deep into what it was like growing up within Scientology. We're going to talk about what it was like being part of the events team in Scientology, and most importantly, we haven't discussed this before at length, we're going to be talking about what it was like when they actually started fair gaming him and his wife and his family, stalking him, harassing him for speaking out and telling the truth about what goes on behind the scenes of Scientology. So, without further introduction, thank you so much for joining us, Blown for Good YouTube channel, Marc Headley.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, of course. And you also wrote a book called Blown for Good, which is on my list. I am going to read it very, very soon. But guys, if you want to check that out, you can read all about Mark's story. Is there anything specific that you'd like to tell people about your book?
No, I think really when I first escaped from Scientology, I just wanted to get out of there. I thought that would be the end of it right there, maybe. And then maybe I might have they might mess with me. I never would have dreamed of writing about all my experiences and then, talking about it to people. And so I didn't really set out to do that. So the book sort of was a way for me. It was very therapeutic. When I first escaped Scientology in 2005, I used to have a lot of nightmares and I used to have a lot of problems sleeping when right after myself and my wife left. And then that was pretty much like a full-time thing until 2009. In 2009, when I wrote the book, I stopped having the nightmares. It was a really weird thing of going through and just putting all of these experiences down, could just kind of shed them. I just sort of was done with them. And then I could sleep again. And then only if I met up with some people that we used to work with, or we started telling stories, or because we started connecting with lots of people who had also escaped over the years. Mm-hmm. And then whenever we do that, sometimes the nightmares would flare up again after those conversations.
Sure.
And so I kind of thought, wow, there's something to this, like having that experience and then holding on to it is somehow it's like trying to get out. And then when you write it or you talk about it or whatever, it starts to kind of, I don't know if it's sort of just baggage, or I don't exactly know how to explain it, but I know that after I wrote the book, I started feeling better, and I started, just from people reading the book and then saying, oh, it helped me because of this, or it helped me because of that. People that weren't even in Scientology read the book and say, oh, it helped me get out of an abusive relationship, or they were drawing a parallel to something I had said or done or experienced to their own life. And to me, I thought, wow, that's really, really cool that something that happened to me could help somebody else. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that's what we aim to do.
I'm not a writer. So, it's written. You really get to see how uneducated I am.
Oh my gosh,
Mark. Because I went to Scientology schools as a child. It was in 1979, so I was 6 years old. My family moved to Los Angeles. My dad was a bass player, and he was moving to California to make it big in a rock band. So we literally packed up. It was my sister, my younger sister. She was about a year and a half younger than I am. And my mom and my dad, we packed up everything. We had a Volkswagen Bug and a U-Haul truck, and we moved. We drove all that stuff to California. And the guy that lived in California, that was my dad's like high school friend, he was the lead singer of the band. His name was Steve Smuck. And Steve Smuck was a Scientologist.
Okay.
And so he tried to recruit my dad and my mom as soon as we got there, like within days. My mom was like talking about all this new stuff that she was learning about.
Really?
And my dad didn't want to have anything to do with it. He was like, there's something, this is not good. They ended up getting, I didn't know this at the time, but they split up because of this, because my mom really fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Wow.
And my dad didn't want to have anything to do with it. So it was sort of like, he got some ultimatum, like either you're going to do Scientology or we're going to have to split up. And so they split up.
And how long was that? Like how long before she decided she wanted to be a Scientologist and she decided to get a divorce because he didn't convert?
It was within months of us being in California. So when we lived in Kansas City, we had a small house, but we did have a house. We lived in a house. I don't know if they rented it or owned it. I don't know any of that. We lived in a house. We had a small front yard. We had a small backyard. When we moved to California, suddenly we were living in apartments in the city, and we didn't have any money. We didn't have our own house anymore. We lived with all these other people, and my mom and dad were fighting all the time. So I was like, And then shortly thereafter, then they don't even live together anymore. It took me many years to find out that this was all sort of because of Scientology. And my dad, the craziest thing is my dad stayed in the band with the guy. So
that's so awkward.
It was super awkward now that I think of it. And they would rehearse in the that was the other thing. My dad had an apartment which was across the street from the Scientology Celebrity Center.
Wow. That's the one on Franklin, right?
It's right off of Franklin and like Bronson.
Yeah. Across from UCB.
And the street we lived on was called Tamarind. And Tamarind is the one that goes sort of in between the Celebrity Center and a bunch of apartment buildings. And then it kind of sort of dead ends into the freeway. And then it actually turns into, I think, what's the street called Yucca. And then it goes the other way. But so he lived across the street from the Celebrity Center in this apartment building called the Shangri Lodge. And then they rehearsed as a band in the basement of the Celebrity Center for years and years and years. So I was always over at the Celebrity Center full time as a kid, just playing and hanging out. And Lisa Marie Presley was there at that time. She was living in the Celebrity Center. It wasn't called the Celebrity Center back then. It was just called the Manor Hotel. Yeah. And it was just a place where Scientologists lived. She lived there. Lisa Marie Presley lived there. Beck lived there. Beck, the popular musician. He lived there with his brother Channing and his father, I think his name was Jeff Campbell or David Campbell. And so it was sort of like a cool place to just hang out as a kid because there's all these famous people. I met Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. They shot 48 Hours there at the Celebrity Center. And I met Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal. I got them to sign I still have their autograph to this day. I still have a little thing. But as I got older, the Celebrity Center was taken over by the Sea Organization. And they actually had, that's where they had a lot of kids. They would take care of kids at that same property. There was a place called the Cadet Estates Org, or the CEO. And that's where all the babies and the children of Sea Org members lived. And so we would see these kids. They were the same ages as us. They were these 7, 8, 9-year-old kids. And they were always dirty and they were stinky and they wore the same clothes every day. And so I always had this really bad impression of the Sea Organization because I would see all these kids that were just unkempt and not really taken care of. Yeah. And then my mom kept talking about Scientology and she was doing courses and everybody we knew were Scientologists. Then we ended up going to Scientology schools. And
so how was it, do you think, that your mom was able to afford these courses if you just moved to LA? And I mean, I live in LA. It's very expensive. And so how was she able to get around that?
That's a good question. And she was doing a course that was like $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, but we didn't have, it wasn't being spent on the family. Like we would, we didn't have food in our cupboards, and it was sort of like every penny would go to Scientology. And I remember as a kid thinking, like I can't get, new shoes, or I remember as a kid being super, super embarrassed that my mom would get all my clothes from the Salvation Army. Like that's where she would get clothes for us, because you could get them there cheap, or like the thrift store or secondhand, and I remember being like, why do we have to, you're spending all this money on the school that I'm going to. That's a Scientology school. The private schools are also very expensive. Scientology private schools, I mean, this is in the 80s. You're paying $500, $600 a month for school.
Wow.
That's a lot of money back in the 80s to spend on, elementary private school. And my sister and I both went to one of these schools. So I remember thinking, like, you're spending all this money on this. I don't even want to be here. I don't want to be I don't want to do any of this. And I can't have nice clothes or have dinner at home. Like we don't have family dinners, so if I would go to a friend's house, or I'd go to a sleepover, and I'd be like, oh my God, this is what a real family does. Like when they get home, they have dinner, and then, you got to do your chores, and you go to your, like I was just on the streets as a kid. Like I was just playing Hollywood Boulevard. That's where that was essentially where I hung out as a child, was
really
just on Hollywood Boulevard, or just at the, the corner liquor store, so for many, many years, I was sort of annoyed by Scientology. Like this is jacking up my scene here, the Scientology thing. And whenever something goes wrong.
Right. Of course you would feel resentful.
Yeah, resentful. That's exactly. I was very resentful of Scientology. And when I was about 15, I realized I'm never going to make my mom happy unless I do Scientology, and unless I like dedicate myself to this. She just hates me. She just hates me as a kid. She just hates me. And my dad was indifferent, because he realized early on that he needed to just play along. If he wanted to stay in our lives, he couldn't talk smack about Scientology.
Yeah.
But then at a certain point, I think I was about 13 or 14, he was like, he couldn't take LA. The band was always about to make it, and they were about to sign a record deal. And when you're in LA, it's like,
you're so close.
We're so close. We're going to make it big. We're going to make it big. And they played it. I mean, I remember as a kid sneaking into shows they would do at the Whiskey, or other places on Sunset Strip, and Guns N' Roses was coming up at that time, and Oingo Boingo, and the Chili Peppers, and they were playing at places they were playing it at the same time. And then those bands would kind of go on to make it big. So I was kind of like, I always had hope, like they're playing before and after some of these guys, and but it was just whatever. But so finally in the late 80s, my dad was like, I can't take LA anymore. And he moved back to Nebraska or Kansas.
There goes your lifeline.
And so then I was sort of stuck with my mom.
Yeah.
And it was Scientology or nothing. It was literally like, if you do not do this, then you cannot be part of our household. And I ended up moving out when I was 14. I went to live with my friends.
Whoa.
I went to stay with my friend, because my mom was like, no, you're not doing Scientology. So you're not going to live here you can't be part of our household. And I was like, okay, good. I'm out. And she sort of called my bluff. Like I was like, I'm not doing this. I'd rather move out. And she's like, well, then you're going to have to do that. I'm like, okay, good. And I ended up living with my friend.
I'm curious if, knowing what you know now, you can kind of speculate as to why your mom was behaving this way. And if I had to guess, it would be because, for one, Scientology doesn't believe in children. They're more of a nuisance than anything. And my other speculation would be, I feel like, knowing what I know now about cults, how they get you in, is they give you all of these empty promises. Like, if you join Scientology, you'll be able to get rich or provide for your family. And seeing as how you were trying to make it in Los Angeles and she didn't have a lot of money, do you think maybe they were using that to entice her to, I don't know, become more well off? Or what do you think now?
She made good money. She was a salesperson.
Okay. And
she was a good salesperson. She made good money, but she gave it all to Scientology. So I think, she was a hustler before she got into Scientology.
Got it.
Scientology, if there is one thing, if you're a hustler, they will take advantage of the fact that you can hustle to get them some money.
Sure.
And so, and if anything, they might even help you learn how to hustle. That's another thing. They'll give you idea. Like they know all the ways you can do things to make money because they're telling people to do those all the time so they can give them some.
Yeah.
So taking out extra credit cards and, doing this or, whatever it is, or even the networking of Scientologists. So once you're in that network, they're all hustlers trying to get money to give to Scientology. So there's all kinds of schemes and Amway and, Herbalife. They're doing all that MLM stuff. Scientologists eat that up all day, every day.
Right.
If they can get 20 more, they do teach you in Scientology that if you're not able to talk to people, then you're screwed. You need to learn how to talk to people. Like you need to be able to have a conversation with anybody about anything.
Yeah.
And until you get up to that point, like you're useless to us. And so they really beat people over the head on communication and being willing to overstep boundaries and push the limits and sort of be that bull in the china shop in the relationship or the conversation, like not afraid to overstep if it means getting what you want. Right.
What is the term that they use? And I forgot what it was, but it's something like you are sacrificing for the greater good. So
Yes.
by any means necessary, it doesn't matter as long as it's for the gain of Scientology. Is there a term for that?
Yeah, they call it the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics.
That's what it was.
So you have all these urges to survive in Scientology, and they're just numbered 1 through 8. That's all you need to know. There's yourself, and then there's your partner, and then there's your family, and then there's groups, and it just goes 1 through 8. All these different dynamics of your life. When you're first indoctrinated into Scientology, you learn that every single one of those dynamics will do better if Scientology is applied to them.
Sure.
It sort of becomes anything good for Scientology is good for your life, not the other way around. So you learn that early on. And so when a Scientologist has like a crisis of faith moment, they have to decide what's the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. And whatever helps Scientology will always be the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to do something in your life that's not going to help Scientology, then that's usually going to be the wrong decision. The thing I tell people about Scientology is that Scientology is a deck of cards. And they give you the deck. That's the first thing they do is they give you the deck. And they tell you where to put each card. And you build this house of cards around yourself that Scientology told you how to build it.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you realize that you hold all the cards and you can do whatever you want, the whole thing just falls down immediately.
Yeah.
And when Scientologists realize that, that's really when they start to kind of deprogram themselves. Like, the only reason I'm here is because they've told me that I can't leave. If I decide to leave, I'm gone. And so it's this weird, and when Going Clear came out, when Lawrence wrote that book, Going Clear, and he called it The Prison of Belief, I was like, that's the best sentence to describe Scientology, because you say, well, could you have left? No, I couldn't have left. Why not? Well, because they wouldn't let me leave. But what would happen if you did leave? I don't know. Well, you did leave. What happened? Well, I escaped.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but they didn't stop you. They couldn't stop you. No. So you could have done that earlier.
Yeah.
And then you go, yeah, actually, I probably could have. I probably could have gone whenever I wanted to, but they make it out. Even when you are there, I mean, at the end, base is a little bit different because they have barbed wire around the entire property and they have security guards there and the gates are closed. You can't just leave. You have to jump over the barbed wire. But if you jump over the barbed wire, once you do that, they're going to try to drag you back. But if you say, hey, I'm going to call the cops, then they won't. Then they're like, whoa. No, we didn't. We're good. You're good. Do what you need to do. But you don't know that when you're in that prison of belief.
Yeah.
You think they're going to do whatever they're going to do to get you back. So the more, and this is a big difference between my wife and myself, is that, so I end up, well, I'll just finish the story.
Yeah, please. At your friend's house.
I was living with my friend, and then his dad used to be in the Sea Organization.
No.
And so did his mother.
You can't get away.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
But they both used to be in the Sea Organization, but they left because they had this rule that you couldn't have kids in the Sea Organization anymore. They had already had one kid in the Sea Org, but then when they had the second one, the Sea Org was like, you guys got to go because you can't have all these kids.
Okay.
So they ended up getting out of the Sea Org, and the first kid that they had that when they were in the Sea Organization was my best friend at school when we were like 12, 13, 14. And so I start living with them, and then they live near where the school is, where I go to, and I'm actually working at the school. It's called Delphi. It's a Scientology school. I'm working at the school and being a student at the school, but I'm living with my friend. And they're totally cool. They're totally hip to it. Like, yeah, we need Jesse needs somebody to hang out with, and your mom don't like you much, so you might as well stay here. Like, it wasn't a secret that my mom and I didn't get along, and she grew up on a farm with 8 brothers and sisters, and so she wasn't afraid to throw a punch or two when I was a little kid, like once a week or once a day or whenever it was needed. Getting out of there for me was like, oh yeah, this is a gift. This is a gift. I not living there. I'll do that. It wasn't a big stretch for me not to live with her. So, but the family is going to they're going to go on holiday for the summer, and they're like, hey, you could come with us. Where are we going? We're going to go to Clearwater, Florida.
No. Did you go?
I went.
Oh, no.
And we went to the Free Winds. They have this cruise ship in the Free Winds.
Uh-huh.
And me and my friend, we did a course. We did a Scientology course on this cruise ship in Aruba and Bonaire and Curacao. And then we did it really fast. Like, you're supposed to spend so much time studying when you're on this Scientology cruise ship. We were like, let's just blow through this course as fast as we can. Let's just do it full time so we can just party the whole rest of the cruise that we're doing this. And so instead of going on course studying our courses every single day for like a week, we just went all day the first day and just finished them, and then just partied the next 6 days of the cruise kind of thing. But then when we ended up going back to Florida, my best friend got recruited for the Sea Organization in Clearwater to go work with this guy named David Miscavige. So then I was like, man. And all this is in my book, and I'll speed it up. But I then ended up moving in with another friend at school. She was a girl. She wasn't my girlfriend, but she was a friend of mine that was a girl. And her sister was going to a Scientology boarding school in Oregon. So they had an empty bedroom. So they're like, you could stay in my sister's room. And I was like, okay, great. Because I just lost my last house because they went to the Sea Org.
Yeah.
And you will not believe this. That family got recruited to join the Sea Org.
Oh my gosh. So you leave your home because you don't want anything to do with Scientology, but then you end up in the homes of Scientologists. It's just...
And so then finally I lived with a teacher that worked at the school, and another lady who was like a paramedic. And I had 2 40-plus-year-old females as my roommates. I was 15. I lived with 2 women. That one was a teacher and one was a paramedic. Uh-huh. It was the most random setup. I even when I was there, I was like, we're like sitting there eating dinner, and I'm like, this is really weird, gals. I mean, I got to tell you, this is weird for me as a 15-year-old to be here eating dinner with you 2 right now. Yeah. Anyway, but the woman that I lived with, the teacher that went to the same school, ended up getting recruited for the Sea Organization.
Of course she did. Is there anyone who didn't get recruited to the Sea Organization?
Well, at that point, I gave up. I joined. They recruited me, and they recruited her. And I was like, that's it. I mean, I can't. I'm 15. I'm trying to hustle to make rent. I got to somehow get food and stuff and pay for my school. And all this is happening. I'm 15. I don't have a car. I don't have any way to get around. I have a skateboard or bike or something, you know? And I'm sort of like, I was 15. I was like, I can't take it.
Yeah.
It's too much pressure for a 15-year-old to make rent, somehow feed himself, has no idea how to do any of these things. Cause I wasn't ever in a house where that happened. It was sort of like, hey, we're going to get McDonald's. Here's something to eat, just like, or my mom was always on doing Scientology, after work every night. And my dad was at rehearsal. Band rehearsal every night. So from when I was probably 7 or 8 till 14, I was hanging out on Hollywood Boulevard, and I'd sometimes come home at midnight and nobody'd be there. Like, I'd get home and I'd be the first person home.
What about your little sister?
She would be at friends' houses, or she'd be, she was really good friends with, same thing. She just lived at the other people's houses for weeks on end, or, and do that. And she mostly lived with my mom. And because I mostly lived with my dad, and then when I didn't live with my mom, I was just kind of like on my own. So the Sea Org was like, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to worry about paying rent. You don't have to worry about how you're going to get fed. So it was like 3 hots and a cot. And I was going to go. And what they told me was that I was going to go to this drug rehabilitation facility in Oklahoma. And I was going to help people get off drugs. And I was going to get paid minimum wage. And I was just like, you know what? That sounds awesome. I'm going to get out of LA. I'm not going to have all this craziness. I'm going to go work at this drug rehabilitation place and help people get off drugs. I'm like 15. Yeah, sure. That sounds like a great thing to do instead of school and instead of all this other nonsense. And I'm not going to have to be anywhere near the craziness. Let's do it. So when you join the Sea organization, the first thing you do is it's called the Sea. It's basically called the Sea Org member hat. It's training on how to be a Sea Org member. And you do this on this program. It's called the Estates Project Force. And you do all these Sea organization courses. And the first thing you find out is that you're going to go wherever we tell you, and you don't get a say, and you don't get any choice in the matter. If we say you're going here, that's where you're going.
Yeah.
And if you're going here, that's where you're going. That's it. There's no decisions on your part. That's all over for you. And so I realized, like, oh, they tell me all these things. They told me what I wanted to do, and and they figured out which piece fit their little puzzle, but there's no chance I'm going to go do that now. And as soon as I finished this Estates Project Force, they made me the personnel director of the international organization. It's like a front group. It's called the Association for Better Living and Education. And it's what runs the Scientology schools, the Scientology drug rehab, the Scientology criminal reform, and this other group that they print a booklet called The Way to Happiness. Is called ABLE International. That's the group that runs all the Scientology front groups. They put me in charge, like the personnel director of that organization at 15 years old. That's what was my first job in the Sea organization. I'm like, this ain't helping people get off drugs in Oklahoma. And guess where it was? It was on Hollywood Boulevard, where I'd been my whole life. And so I was like, oh, I'm just back in the sick, right? Just like, poof, right back where I started.
Yeah.
And then as the head of personnel, my main job is to get people into the Sea organization. That's like my number one job in life, is to get people in.
That is so ironic, Mark. Like, that's your job and you've been dodging it for so long, and now you're that person.
That's right. My whole life, I was like, the last place I want to end up is at that place. And now I'm in charge of getting people into that place.
Yeah. Did you have to live at the Celebrity Center, or where did they house you?
And that's even more bizarre. This is even if there's a twist of fate, my mother lived in an apartment building by what's called the Complex, that big blue building.
Yeah.
Down in Hollywood. And she lived in an apartment building. It's called Edgemont. 1234 Edgemont is the street that she lived on.
Right.
The apartment building that she lived in. Well, at the time they were either doing renovations, or they just had so much overcrowding at this big blue place that they just rented apartments around Hollywood. So I was staying in an apartment on across the hallway from where my mom lived, in the apartment building that I said, peace out. I'm not doing Scientology and I'm moving. I moved into this same apartment building that she lived into as a Sea Org member.
Did you reconnect with her where you're like, hey, Mom, here I am. I did it?
Well, no, now that I was in the Sea Org, I couldn't do any wrong by her. That's it. You achieved the ultimate level.
Yeah.
There's no more you can do as a Scientology child than join the Sea Org. That's sort of, there's no more way to show how dedicated you are to Scientology than to join the Sea organization, because your life's over. You're just a robot in the in the Scientology machine. Now you just do whatever they tell you.
So did she accept you back? Open arms?
Oh, well, 100%. I was the best kid in the world now. And to top it off, I recruited my sister as I'd get somebody in.
No.
So I only recruited one person ever on that job as the recruitment guy, and it was my sister. And as soon as I recruited her, I made her work for me, getting people in. And then I got busted and I was not in personnel anymore. And I left. I was like, yeah, that's over to you. I'm not, you get hot potato, it's over to you. I'm going to go do this over here now. And the crazy thing is when I actually got kicked off of that personnel post. Like there's a thing in Scientology, it's called a committee of evidence. And if your job is to get people into Scientology and you don't get any people into Scientology, you're going to get a committee of evidence and you're going to get in trouble because you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
So I got kicked off of that job. And when that happened, it sort of set in motion, getting scooped up to go to the headquarters. I was like somebody who didn't have a job. And it was like, oh, people that don't have jobs, we can give them a job at this other place. And so then I ended up going to the international headquarters and then working there. I did great. I was a worker. And I knew audiovisual, and it was an audiovisual production facility. And I grew up, my dad was a musician, and I used to, fix radios and TVs as a kid. And that was like my main interest was audiovisual things. So I flourished at the headquarters, making cassettes and VHS tapes. And then I ended up for years and years, working in their manufacturing division, and the division of the Scientology organization that produces all of Scientology's materials and training films and videos is called Golden Era Productions.
Yeah, it is.
And so I used to be in the manufacturing division of that, and I excelled in that area. And because of that, I was promoted to an area of Golden Era Productions that was doing horribly at the time. This is in the early mid 90s. And that was the cinematography department. And so when I got moved over to the cinematography department, I became what is loosely in the movie industry would be called the first assistant director.
Okay.
And so I was the first assistant director of the film team at Golden Era Productions. And I did that for many, many years. And then I ended up getting, Scientology has a hate website set up about me called whoismarcheadley.com.
Oh, I've seen it.
How I'm the most horrible person. And most of the dirt they have on me was from my mom and my sister from when I was a kid.
What?
And so, which is ironic because it's like, if I was such a bad kid, then why'd you send me to the Sea Org? And then why'd you send me to the headquarters? And then why did I just keep getting promoted the entire time? If I was this horrible, horrible guy. I always like to think that I was so bad that I got promoted all the way to the very top of the Scientology organization.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that thrive there, these bad people, I guess. But either way, I ended up being the pre-production director and then ultimately the producer. And then the last job that I was doing when I worked there was I was in charge of the audio visual systems for Scientology in all their organizations internationally. So I was producing interactives and kiosks and film theaters and these sort of audiovisual systems. And that's what I was doing when I escaped, in January of 2005.
Wow. Okay. I cannot wait to hear from your own words what it was like escaping, because we've heard it from Claire and we've had some people reach out like, Shelise, you should really interview Marc, Claire's husband. He's hilariously funny and he and Claire are just so adorable together. I'm a fan of and follower of your channel plus most all SPTV channels. And then we have another comment here who says her story is like a dystopian movie. I don't know if her husband would like to, but I would love to see an interview with the two of them talking more about their relationship in and out of Scientology and his side of the story of getting her out. So yes, a lot of people want to hear all about this. So
sure.
First I want to know, what was it that made you kind of wake up from everything and start to see things for what it was and made you realize that you were in that prison of the mind?
Well, there was a whole, over the years that I was there. So I was there from 1990 to 2005. So from when I was 16 to 32 was basically, I think that's how old I was when I was there. So I essentially grew up at the international headquarters of Scientology as a 16-year-old kid. That's where I was living from then until I was 32. So, everybody that was there in that property, which I would say was almost up to like 900, 1,000 people at one time. They all knew me, every single person there. If you worked at that place, you knew who I was. And I would actually, there were several things that we would do each week. And I was the one who would organize and run the entire crew.
Wow.
Setting up an event or doing these things for every single week for over 10 years. So even if somebody was there for only 5 years when I was there, you knew who I was. And of course the people that were there the entire time knew who I was. And I was a worker. I didn't care about like the Scientology counseling or the courses. I didn't do any. To this day, have never even read Dianetics.
No way.
Yep. Never read it. What didn't interest me at all. Like I just didn't do, just didn't end up doing the counseling or the studies or the courses. And the funny thing is that when Tom Cruise got into Scientology in the 90s and he was training at the international headquarters, they had to find somebody who had no Scientology counseling to be able to have him do as a guinea pig practice doing counseling on that person. And there was only 2 people at the property that were like so green weenies in Scientology that he could do that. And it was myself and the security chief. The security chief at the international base had also never done any Scientology, and neither had I. So Tom Cruise, actually, both of us were his guinea pigs.
Oh my gosh. We need a whole episode on your thoughts about Tom Cruise.
Oh my gosh. The stories. Oh yeah. That's a whole nother video.
Stay tuned.
The only reason I could qualify to do that was because I had no counseling.
Yeah.
So the very little counseling that I have had in Scientology was done by Tom Cruise himself.
How funny.
So, and like I said, I never read Dianetics. The only courses that I did were usually courses that I had to do for my job. So there's an audio course, there's a cinematography course, and it's really just L. Ron Hubbard writing a bunch of nonsense that you have to read, his opinions on how things should be done in the audio industry or the cinematography industry. Like I had to do a school in the C organization. It's called Car School. And you actually have to do a school to be able to drive a car. I already had a license. When I was 14, I went to Nebraska and got a driver's license because in Nebraska, the kids have to drive tractors and stuff on the highways for the farms and stuff. So I just went to Nebraska where my dad lived, got a license. And then when I was in LA, I just used that to drive as a 14-year-old.
Oh my
I
gosh.
used a Nebraska license. So when I got to the headquarters, I had a license. I could drive. Like, no, you gotta do this. You gotta do this course. And again, it's a bunch of things that L. Ron Hubbard said about cars, like how to wash them and how to wash the windows with like newspaper and ammonia. I'm 100% serious. So in order to drive a car in the C organization, you actually have to read the manual of the car. You have to read that manual. Like if it's we had Hondas, we had red Hondas, these like Honda Civics. We had to read the manual cover to cover, and then we had to give it to somebody else, and they had to quiz us on the manual, like ask us different words in the manual. And like, okay, how do you, where's the spare tire compartment? You know, like, and they give you a quiz on the manual. And unless you had done that, you weren't allowed to drive that car. And unless you had done car school, you weren't allowed to drive any car. So those were the few courses or Scientology courses that I did were like just nonsense courses like that. And the courses you have to do when you join the C organization. So that's a huge difference between my wife and myself because she was in the counseling business.
Yeah.
She was in the counseling departments and divisions, and she had to do investigations and interrogate people on the e-meter. And so she was all into that. And because that was her job on the job training is the operating Thetan levels where you find out about Xenu and all the craziness. And so that was her, like I was required to do the audio nonsense. She was required to do the counseling nonsense. So when we left in January 2005, like as soon as we were gone, I was like, woohoo, we're good to go. But she was still like, having a crisis of faith, like, but then this, and what about my family? And I'm like, oh, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, sucks to suck. They're over there. They're on the other side, man. We're on the good side now. We don't have to worry about none of that, So I was sort of, and that's why to me, it's also funny that they have a hate website up about me. And there's my mom talking smack about me. And I'm like, oh, this broad used to beat the shit out of me when I was a kid. Like, what do we care about her? Like, well, now we care what she has to say. I'm like, oh, so to me, it's sort of like, disconnection is a horrible thing and families shouldn't be broken up. And I feel for anybody who had a loving relationship with a family member that they are now no longer to talk to. Mm-hmm. In my case, approved. Yeah. I don't need to talk to her. So it's sort of like, I feel it's almost like Scientology not allowing my mom to be part of my kids' lives and our family is like, they did all that. They did that work for me. Like, I wouldn't want her trying to, whisper things into my kids' ears about, this or that, or what should be happening or what they should be doing.
So you
were asking, what was the thing that sort of, so when I was on that, audiovisual systems post, the whole time that we were there, David Miscavige, he's like one of the gossipy female teenagers in high school. That's David Miscavige.
He's a mean girl?
Mean girls. That's right. He's a mean girl. David Miscavige is a mean girl. I said it here. Quote me, folks. You can clip that. David Miscavige is a mean girl. He is always meddling in people's business. As the leader, he's meddling.
Yeah.
So he, on many occasions, would ask Claire in front of me, "You're still with that guy?" Like on multiple occasions, he said that with me. I was standing right there. Many times he would mistake us like, "Oh, I thought you were brother and sister. You're together?" Like that kind of thing.
Ew.
Yeah. Yes. So he would do that the whole time from the early 90s all the way into the early 2000s. He would do that all the time. And he had asked me to design all these audiovisual systems. Let's say there was 35 different ones. And they had been being asked to be designed for 40 years. And no one had ever designed them. In 40 years, no one could design these systems. And in only a matter of a few years, I had designed personally, let's say 10 of them. And he liked them. And they were getting approved and we were building them and they were being installed. And so I was at that time, it was sort of like a big deal. Like, no one's been able to do this in 40 years. Also, when I had worked in the manufacturing area, they couldn't produce cassettes that were high quality. And I ended up being the quality control and we ended up producing a lot of high quality cassettes. They couldn't produce films. I went in and became the first assistant director. And over the years, we produced many, many films. Mm-hmm. And then I went into this area and I designed. So I was pretty much a heavy hitter in each area that I had worked in. And I had been promoted over the years. And this area had a very good reputation of every single person that was on the post of the systems director post would they would either end up escaping or they would end up on what's called the Rehabilitation Project Force. The Rehabilitation Project Force, it's basically like a reprogramming camp where you just get full-time interrogations and Scientology counseling. And the time you're not doing that, you're doing very, very heavy labor. Like,
yikes.
Like breaking rocks with sledgehammers kind of stuff, or, demolishing a building or, something that you don't want to do as a daily chore. You're going to do that for 10 hours a day. And the other time you're going to do the counseling or the interrogations. That's the Rehabilitation Project Force. Rehabilitation Project Force, could take 2 or 3 years. There's people that have been on it 10 or 15 years.
Oh.
And you're not allowed to speak unless being spoken to. You have to run everywhere. And you're the That is the lowest of the low in the Sea Org, besides one other low, and that's the RPF's RPF. And inside the Rehabilitation Project Force, there's a Rehabilitation Project Force.
What?
So if you mess up in the Rehabilitation Project Force, you go to the Rehabilitation Project Force within the Rehabilitation, and they call it the RPF's RPF. And that's like, if you don't follow, then you end up usually just getting kicked out, or they just dump you off somewhere. They give you $500 and they give you a plane flight to the middle of nowhere.
Jeez.
Probably the prior 15 people that had held that position, the systems director, 15 in a row, but all the way back to when L. Ron Hubbard was sending that person dispatches, communications to that post. Those people had all gone to the RPF or had escaped from the Sea Organization. That's how long the trail was of death and destruction in a certain post. So, and it didn't take long. And then there was so he had asked, hey, I need this submission from you and all the rest of the systems. You designed a bunch. Let's get the rest. And I had submitted that. I had finished it and given it, sent it to him, but it had to go through other people to get to him. And one of those people was sitting on it. They weren't looking at it and they were just doing other things. And David Miscavige wrote down and said, hey, if Mark's not doing the proposal that I asked him to do, what is he doing? And that's sort of like an invitation to go and find out, investigate Mark. That's what it is. It's sort of like him. Okay, Mark's open game. You can do whatever you want. And so they did. And they found out that all this old equipment that had been being stored in Los Angeles since the 1980s, brand new 16 millimeter projectors, a bunch of old equipment. They had thrown it into they'd thrown it away. They put it in a roll off to have it disposed of. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Don't do that. Send that stuff to me at the headquarters. I'll sell it. Yeah. There's no way. Don't throw that stuff away. And, so a roll off full of equipment that they were throwing away, I ended up selling for like $30,000.
Whoa.
And because in the Sea Organization, you're not allowed to have a credit card. So, you can't have like a Sea Org credit card. You can have your own credit card, but you can't have a Sea Org credit card, unless you work in purchasing. And, so I did this whole proposal. I said, since I'm not allowed to have the card, I'll sell this stuff. Once it gets into my account, then I'll just transfer it to Treasury. And then you guys will be able to spend the money on the stuff I need. Mm-hmm. And so I had a whole thing approved and it was all good to go. And then, they did this big investigation. They're like, it looks like they found a receipt in my office that I had sold something. I'd sold a lens or something that says, we have a receipt we found that says you have $300 in your personal account that should belongs to us. And I was sort of like, 300? Hate to break it to you. I got about 30K in this thing. I got about 30K in this baby. And I was like, it's all above board. You guys all signed off on it. I have it all approved in writing right here. It's like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And then everybody was like, no, we never agreed to that. We don't know anything about this. And so then it was like, okay, you're going to go to the RPF. And I was like, are you kidding me? I turned a roll off into 30K and I'm in trouble. What about the guys that are going to throw it away? Yeah. I thought this is a joke, right? This is silly. I don't give it. This had happened many times over the years. And I'm always just like, you guys are ridiculous. Like I'm a rock star and you're ridiculous. And this is silly. Here, what do you want? You're looking for $250? I was like, here's $250. Okay. Like, get off my case. They're like, nope, it's done. You can't do it. You're going to the RPF. Like, that's it. It's done. And I was like, what? I was literally like, this is ridiculous. I thought this is really going to happen probably. Like, they're really going to do this. This is insane. So that night I was sort of like, you know what? I'm going to get some money together and I'm just going to say, listen, like they did an accounting and they said, you sold this much stuff, but there's only this much money. And I'm like, well, yeah, eBay takes a cut and there's shipping and that's the difference. And they're like, no, you spent that money. And I'm like, guys, you don't know, because nobody there's on the internet. They don't even know how eBay works. They don't know anything about the real world. So I'm like,
right.
If I got that money and I have to give a cut to eBay and I have to pay for the shipping, it comes out of that money. And they're like, nope, that was our money. You spent our money. And so I was like, oh my gosh, so I said, so what's the difference? And they said, and this is the ridiculous part, is they were like, well, the difference is like $275.
Are you kidding me?
You're talking about, I sold $30,000 worth of stuff and you guys are going to light me up for 270. And I was like, it's actually more than that. The only reason it's not more than that is because my personal money is in there.
Yeah.
So you're not only screwing me on the shipping and the eBay fees, but you're going to take my money as well. And I said, you know what? I'll get you $275. And then they were like, nope. And I said, well, I'm going to get the money together no matter what. And they were like, okay, do whatever you want. So I actually spent the whole afternoon and night rounding up cash for this thing. And, I went to my sister. I went to the payroll officer of the organization. I said, hey, do I have any back pay? And they were like, yeah, you have this, you have 2 weeks. I was like, okay, I need to get that. I got to sort out this dumb. It's a whole big, everybody knows about this. It's like a whole big flap. It's like all over. Oh, Marc stole $275. And I'm just like, I got to go sort this bullshit out. So I need all my back pay. And I was like, you know what? Give me my sister's back pay too. So I got her back. She had like 2 or 3 weeks. I was like, yeah, give me that. It's $46. So $150 from her. $100 from me. And then I went to Claire and I was like, shoot, she was in a meeting with somebody. And so I went up to where she worked and I was like, hey, I need to get into Claire's office. And it's like an area where I'm not supposed to be. And they're like, okay, well, you can go in here. And I was like, okay, get her purse. She's got cash in there. Taking that, got $250 out of her. I got about $500. So, I'm like, this is good. This is good. I'm going to sort this out. So I go and I get, L. Ron Hubbard's granddaughter. Her name is Roanne. She lived at the property. Very good friends with her. I wake her up. It's like 1:00 in the morning now. I wake her up. Roanne, can you spot me like $200? She's got money. She's the L. Ron Hubbard's granddaughter. She's got a few bucks. Hey, can you spot me $200? I get a check from her. And, this is all in my book, by the way, and even more excruciating detail. But, I go back and I say, okay, here's $275 cash. And they're like, no, it's done. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
This is ridiculous. Anyway, so they're like, no, just be ready in the morning. You're going to get interrogated and then you're going to go to the RPF in Los Angeles. That's it. And if you go to the RPF, if you're at the international headquarters and you go to Los Angeles to the RPF, you're never going to see your spouse ever again because you can't really. It's very, very unique for a person to be able to come back to the international headquarters from, if they go to the RPF, it's very hard for them to get, unless Dave Miscavige really needs you, you ain't coming back. Like if he's got a problem he can't solve without you, you'll be there in 5 minutes. You won't even have to finish the RPF. You'll just be done with the RPF. If he needs you, and that happened all the time. There's a guy named Jeff Hawkins. I think he went to the RPF 4 times and then he just came back each time. Because Dave was like, hey, where's Jeff? And nobody was going to tell him he's on the RPF. They're going to say, oh, he'll be here if he's just doing something, sir. We'll have him here in a few hours. And literally put him in a car, zip him up there. That wasn't going to happen with me because I was like, I was basically like, I don't agree with any of this. This is insane. But I knew that if I went to the RPF, I'd never see Claire again.
Yeah.
And for real, the only reason I was still there was because of her. I would have hightailed it out of there before that. If I thought I could, I would have. And so because I wasn't ever going to see her again, I was sort of like, it's done. And I tried to call her and she was in this meeting with this gal. And the crazy thing is she was interrogating a girl whose husband had escaped, that she was trying to go be with the husband. And Claire was supposed to interrogate that girl to find out why she wanted to go be with the husband. Talk about craziness.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was basically like, I don't have any way out of this. And at the time, I used to drive a motorcycle around the property. And because they had locked it up a few times at the property, if you get in trouble, they lock up your vehicle because they know you're going to take off on your vehicle. Well, at a time when I was allowed to drive my vehicle, I had driven it to the house that we lived in that was right next to the property. And I just parked it in the garage of that house. So I had a bike under a bike cover sitting in the garage.
Yeah.
And I don't even know why. It might have even have been just subliminally. I just did this. But this bike was sitting at my house. And my house was right on the outside of the gate of the property. So I'd have to go outside of the property and go to my house. And they had cameras all along the houses that were next to the property, so they could see you coming and going. They could, if you're going to take off, they'll see you take off. So I was basically told, you're going to get interrogated tomorrow, and then you're going to the RPF. And so I was like, okay, I'm going home to sleep. I'm out. And I just went home, and I went to my house right through the gate, walked down the street to my house, and it's like right on the exterior of the property. And then I called Claire we had these Nextel radio phones.
Yeah.
I called Claire and I said, hey, are you coming home? And she's like, no. And I'm like, I really need to talk to you about some stuff. And she's like, yeah, if I can, I will. And I was like, okay. And I actually fell asleep in the bed with the phone.
Oh.
And I didn't pack or do anything. I didn't get ready. The next thing I know, it's morning and there's somebody banging on the door. And I'm like, oh shit. And I look and I'm like, oh, I slept in. I didn't go to the morning muster. So they're saying, hey, where is he? He's not here. And so security was knocking on my door like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I was told. And I was like thinking quick. I went to the front door and I was like, they're like, hey, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in. I was like, oh, I was told I was going to get interrogated. So I slept so I could get some sleep so I could do that. They're like, no, you got to come. And I'm like, okay, I'll take a shower, I'll get ready, And they're like, okay. And I knew this security guy. I mean, I've known the guy for 15 years.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, whatever. And so he left. And then I'm like, I gots to go.
Hey guys, future me popping in to let you know this episode was so juicy that we just had to split it up into two. I promise you, all of that stuff we promised at the beginning is coming in the next episode. We will be talking about his incredible escape out of Scientology, what it was like getting his wife Claire out of Scientology, and all of the fair gaming, in Scientology terms, that came after he was speaking out. We have internal documents that prove what they were trying to do to take Marc down. So definitely stay tuned for the next episode. I promise it's coming very soon. If you want to follow Marc, you can go to his YouTube channel at Blown for Good, and we'll link all of his socials in the description below as well. And thanks so much for watching, guys. It would mean the world if you could like and subscribe, comment below some words of encouragement for Marc here. It helps us, helps the algorithm. And if you want to support even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults to consciousness. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.